It's the idea, the strong belief, that to really become fluent in English, you must have a speaking partner. Perhaps you have thought this yourself, right? If only I had a native speaker to practice with, then I would finally speak English well. It sounds logical, doesn't it? Language is about communication, so it makes sense to imagine that you need someone on the other side of the conversation. But here's the thing. That belief is a misconception. A misconception is simply a mistaken idea, a wrong assumption, okay? And this particular misconception has held back thousands of learners. This has disappointed many learners. The truth is that you don't need another person to practice English with every single day. In fact, you can develop fluency entirely on your own. And in some ways, independent practice, which is practice you do by yourself, can actually be more powerful because you decide the pace, the speed, the topic, and the focus, okay? You're not waiting for someone else. Now, let's pause for a moment and think about why traditional methods often fall short, especially for people learning on their own. When I say fall short, I mean they don't quite deliver what you really need. They do not give you what you really want or need, okay? Maybe you have attended a language class where 20 students take turns and you only get to speak for 2 minutes. Maybe you have had a speaking partner who was friendly but didn't correct you. So, you repeated the same mistakes again and again. Or maybe you have relied on the occasional conversation with someone online. This may have given you a nice moment of practice, but not the repetition you needed to grow. These methods can leave you feeling stuck because fluency is built by speaking consistently, again and again, every single day, until the words become natural. So, what is the alternative? What can you do instead? What is the other path? The answer is self-directed practice. Okay? Self-directed practice. Self-directed simply means you take the lead. You become the guide. You become the leader. And once you guide yourself, you can create a fluency system that runs every single day without depending on a class schedule or a partner's availability. You can practice anytime you want. One of the most powerful tools I recommend is what I call the inner conversation method. Well, that's a big word, but it simply means talking to yourself. This is where you take your thoughts, the ideas already inside your mind, and turn them into English words. In other words, you talk to yourself, not silently, but out loud. For example, imagine you're cooking breakfast, okay? You don't just crack the eggs in silence. Instead, you narrate, which means you describe out loud what you are doing, almost as if you're telling a story. I'm cracking the eggs. The pan is heating up. I think I will add some cheese. By narrating your actions, you bring your inner thoughts to life in English. You become the storyteller of your own daily life. Another way to use the inner conversation method is by responding to content, okay? When you watch a news video, don't just sit back and absorb the information passively. And absorb here means taking in, okay? Instead, talk back to it. Pretend the presenter asks you for your opinion. You might say, well, I don't completely agree with that. From my point of view, the situation is more complicated. Okay? Something like that. Now, by answering the screen, you simulate a dialogue. It may not be real, but it trains your brain to respond quickly, just as if it were. And then there are self-dialogues, which are especially effective. A self-dialogue is when you play both roles in a conversation. It might feel unusual at first, but it works beautifully. You can practice arguments, explanations, even storytelling. For example, pretend you're explaining a movie to a friend. So the main character wants to escape the city, but he doesn't have enough money. Okay? Something like that. By rehearsing both sides, by practicing both sides, you practice the natural rhythm of English conversation without even needing a partner. Of course, technology today makes all of this even easier. We now have AI conversation partners, such as ChatGPT. Imagine it's midnight and you suddenly want to practice ordering food in a restaurant. With AI, you can do it instantly. No need to wait for tomorrow's class or schedule a session. And let's not forget personalized learning paths. Personalized means tailored, designed just for you. Many apps now analyze your progress and suggest what you need to practice next. This way, you don't waste time repeating material you already know, and instead, you concentrate on the areas that will push you forward, okay? You focus on the areas that help you improve. Okay, now let's talk about your daily fluency blueprint. A blueprint is like a plan, like a program, a design you can follow. And the truth is, your plan doesn't have to be complicated. Even just 15 minutes a day of focused, consistent practice can transform your fluency over time. Transform means change, usually in a good way. Think of it like physical exercise. You don't build strength by going to the gym once for 3 hours and then stopping, right? You build strength by exercising a little regularly over weeks and months. The same principle applies to English. So, what might this daily routine look like? In the morning, as you get ready, narrate your actions. I'm brushing my teeth. I'm choosing what to wear today. In the afternoon, listen to a short podcast or a video and then talk back to it. Add your own opinion. In the evening, practice a short self-dialogue. Pretend you're telling someone about your day. Today, I was busy. First, I had to do this, then I had to do that. Okay? In this way, you have spoken English 3 separate times during the day without needing anyone else. And here's a powerful tip. Track your progress, okay? Tracking means keeping a record, following what you do. You can record your voice once a week and save it. In the beginning, you will hear mistakes, but after weeks and months, when you compare your recordings, you will hear clear progress. This is incredibly motivating. It gives you the energy to keep moving forward. And that brings us to the long-term vision. Fluency isn't something you reach in one big leap, okay? In one big step. It's something you construct, you build, piece by piece, like building a house, brick by brick, word by word, sentence by sentence. If you keep showing up daily, even with small efforts, you will create something permanent and powerful. All right? So, let's return to the central question of today's episode. Do you really need a partner to speak English every day? The answer is no. You can absolutely unlock fluency on your own. What you need are the right methods, which is the inner conversation method, self-dialogues, and narrating your daily life. You need the right tools, such as AI partners, ChatGPT, and above all, you need consistency and a clear vision of where you are going. Remember, every single time you speak out loud in English, you're strengthening your fluency muscle. You don't need to wait for permission. You don't need to wait for a partner. You already have everything you need to begin right now. If you found this episode useful, here is my challenge to you. Right after this podcast, speak out loud. If you don't agree with what I said, say it out loud. That is completely okay. Summarize what you learned in your own words. Try a short self-dialogue or narrate the next thing you do. Start your daily solo fluency journey now, because the best partner you could ever have is actually yourself. Thank you for joining me today on English Unleashed. I'm Tom, and until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. Bye for now. There was no phone beside my bed. There was no alarm clock to ring. I woke up only because the sunlight came through the thin curtains. The bed was small and the blanket was heavy. It kept me warm during the night, but the room was still very cold. I sat up slowly. My back felt stiff from the hard mattress. The room was quiet. There was no sound of traffic, no sound of machines. Only the soft call of a bird outside the window. I washed my face with cold water. There was no bathroom, no sink, no hot shower. On a small wooden table, there was a bowl filled with water. I put my hands inside. The water was icy and it made me shiver. I splashed the water on my face. I felt more awake, but also colder. Then I got dressed. I did not wear jeans or a t-shirt. Those clothes did not exist in my world. I wore a simple white shirt. I pulled it over my head and buttoned it. I put on my brown trousers. It was made of thick fabric. On my feet, I wore heavy boots. The clothes were not new. They had small holes and old stitching. But they were strong. They kept me safe during the day. I opened the window. The air came in. It was fresh but cold. The street outside was quiet. A horse passed by. The horse was pulling a wooden cart filled with vegetables. There were no buses. It was the start of a new day in the past. After I dressed, I went into the kitchen. The kitchen was small. There was a wooden table in the center. There was no fridge. There was no electric light. The only light came from the window. On the table, there was bread, butter, and a jug of milk. The bread was hard and brown. It was baked the day before. The butter was soft but a little salty. The milk was fresh. I sat down, and my family sat with me. We did not have plates for everyone. We shared. I cut a piece of bread. I spread butter on it with a small knife. The butter melted slowly because the bread was still a little warm. I drank a cup of milk. It was creamy and thick. It tasted different from the milk today. It was natural without sugar. My father ate quietly. He had worked late the night before. My little sister chewed her bread slowly. She looked at me and smiled. The room was simple, but we were together, and that made it warm. After breakfast, I left the house. I put on my coat because the air was cold. I said goodbye to my family and I walked outside. The street was made of stones. My boots made a loud sound with every step. I did not take a bus. I did not drive a car. There were no buses. There were no cars. I walked. I always walked. On the way, I saw a woman sweeping the front step with a broom. I saw a boy carrying a bucket of water from the well. Two old men sat on a bench. They were talking slowly. The morning air was fresh. The smell of bread came from the bakery. The smell of horses came from the street. I walked for 30 minutes. The factory was at the edge of the town. When I arrived, I saw many other workers going inside. The factory was big. The walls were dark with smoke. Inside, the machines were loud. They made a constant, heavy sound. The air was thick. It was difficult to breathe. I worked with many other men. Some carried wood. Some worked with metal. Some pushed carts from one side to the other. I carried boxes and moved heavy pieces of wood. It was hard work. My hands became red. My shirt became dirty with dust. The boss walked between us. He wore a hat and carried a stick. He did not speak much. He looked at everyone carefully. We worked for hours without stopping. At midday, we had a short break. I sat on the floor. I ate bread and cheese from my pocket. I drank water from a small metal cup. Then I stood up and worked again. The hours were long. My back hurt. But I continued because I had no choice. In the past, life was hard and work was necessary. When the bell rang, we stopped. The day's work was finished. So I left the factory. My clothes were dirty. My boots were heavy. I walked home slowly. The sun was lower in the sky. The air was cooler. On the street, children were playing with a ball made of cloth. They laughed and shouted. A group of women washed clothes in buckets of water. They rubbed the clothes hard and talked together. A man sold apples from a cart. People stood in line to buy some. The smell of food came from open windows. As I walked, I looked at the sky. It changed from blue to orange and then red. The colors were beautiful, but they also told me that night was coming. When I arrived home, the house looked warm. Smoke came from the chimney. I opened the door and stepped inside. Inside the house, the fire was burning in the fireplace. The room felt warm after the cold outside. The table was ready for dinner. Dinner was simple: soup, bread, and some vegetables. The soup was hot. It smelled of onions and carrots. I dipped my bread into the soup and I ate slowly. My family sat around the table. We talked about our day. My father spoke about his work. My mother spoke about the house. We laughed sometimes, even when we were tired. After dinner, we stayed together. There was no television. There was no radio. We talked. We told stories. My father told us about his childhood. He used his hands to show us how he played in the fields long ago. My little sister played with her doll. My brother cleaned his boots for the next day. The fire cracked in the fireplace. The candle gave us light. The shadows moved slowly on the wall. Later, the house became quiet. The fire became small. The candle became short. We all became sleepy. I went to my room. The bed was small and the blanket was heavy. I put the blanket over me and I felt warm again. Outside, the night was silent. There were no cars, no machines, only the sound of the wind. I closed my eyes. I thought about the day. It was not an easy life, but it was a real life. A day in the past. Lived with my family, food, and simple work. And then I fell asleep. Okay, and that was my story, my day in the past. It was not fast and it was not modern. It was simple, hard, and quiet. Thank you, my friends, for listening to English Unleashed. I hope this story helped you practice the past tense. Until next time, keep learning, keep practicing, and keep believing in yourself. Bye for now. You feel lost. You say, I don't understand anything. This is why many learners never improve their listening. They depend on subtitles. Subtitles become like a crutch, something you cannot walk without. Today, I want to show you a new way, a better way, a way to train your ears and your brain so you can understand English naturally without reading. So let me ask you, what if I told you that there is a secret, a simple secret that most learners miss? It is not about memorizing more words. It is not about listening for 10 hours a day. It is about how you listen. It is about training your brain step by step until English sounds clear, until English feels natural. This is what we will explore together. All right. The first step is to choose the right kind of material. This sounds simple, but many learners make a mistake here. They choose something that is far too difficult. They turn on the news in English. The news is very fast. The speakers talk quickly. Or learners choose a complicated movie, a difficult movie. The actors speak fast. They use slang. They use jokes. And sometimes the sound is not clear. When learners listen to these things, they often feel sad. They feel disappointed. They say, "My English is bad. I cannot understand anything." But let me tell you something. This is not your fault. It is not because you are bad at English. It is not because you cannot learn. It is simply the wrong choice. The problem is not you. The problem is the material. If you try to climb a very high mountain on your first day, of course you will fall. But if you start with a small hill, you can walk, you can climb, and you